Talking Films Online, TFO for short. TFO was founded almost on a whim by Professor Nikhila and myself in June 2020 during the lockdown. Since then, TFO has had uninterrupted discussions on films from all over the world every Saturday at 9 p.m. on Zoom. It is a group of film scholars, researchers, students, teachers, and anyone passionate about cinema. It has been our practice to invite people to select and lead the discussion of the chosen film, which we watch in our own time and place. On some occasions, filmmakers, editors, and cinematographers have also joined our sessions. Aparna Sen, Amol Palekar, Girish Kasarvalli, and Adur Gopalakrishnan, to name a few. We have held film festivals such as East European, Iranian, Women Cinema, and others. In the month of June each year, to celebrate our anniversary, we hold a smartphone short filmmaking contest for students and a lecture series in various university departments. In September 2024, we held our first offline event, an international seminar on Indian cinema in the digital era, continuities and discontinuities, in collaboration with Forum on Contemporary Theory, Baroda. This evening, we will be discussing the Mexican film Pedro Páramo, and the discussion will be initiated by Amanraj Singh. Amanraj is a dedicated educator with more than 2 years of experience in teaching English as a second language to socio-economically disadvantaged Hispanic and Latinx students. Deeply passionate about modern languages and linguistic theory, he has successfully attained C1, B2, and B1 levels in Spanish, Chinese, and French, respectively, and was awarded a full grant by the University of Salamanca, Spain, to attend its teacher training course, Diploma in Hispanic Linguistic Studies, under the auspices of the Instituto Cervantes. He received the Professor Susnigdha De Conference Grant 2024 to present his paper in an international conference organized by Forum on Contemporary Theory, Baroda, in Udaipur. Welcome to you, Amanraj, and over to you.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for those kind words. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this extended exploration of Pedro Páramo, Juan Rulfo's based on Juan Rulfo's groundbreaking 1955 novel and its evocative 2023 film adaptation by cinematographer Rodrigo Prieto. So over the next half hour, we will try to journey through Komala's spectral streets and dissect Rulfo's narrative innovations, try to analyze Prieto's visual strategies that breathe cinematic life into the novel's ghosts. So this talk is organized into 5 comprehensive sections. The first is literary foundations and Rulfo's biographical historical context. Next, we have the narrative architecture, that is fragmentation, polyphony, and minimalism. Then we take a thematic deep dive into memory, death, power, and landscape. The fourth is Rodrigo Prieto's cinematic language. The fifth and the last being the scene-by-scene shot analysis and critical perspectives before the conclusion. So along the way, I will try to weave in the background of both the literary and the theatrical work, that is Pedro Páramo. I will try to weave in Mexico's political upheavals, the agrarian reform, the Cristero War, the post-revolutionary disillusionment, and we will try to reflect on adaptation theory, exploring the alchemy of translating prose into image and sound. By the end, I hope you will appreciate how Rulfo and Prieto, through distinct mediums, converge on universal meditations on memory identity, and power. Beginning with lit, okay. Beginning with literary, yeah, okay. Beginning with literary foundations and Rulfo's biographical historical context, we start with Rulfo's early life and his personal trauma. So Juan Rulfo was born in 1917 and died in 1986. He was born in Apulco, Jalisco, during Mexico's post-revolutionary construction. So his childhood was marked by personal and communal trauma. His father, a revolutionary fighter, he died fighting in 1923, and his mother shortly perished from cholera amid the Cristero War when he was just 9. So now Rulfo was orphaned and he had to move among relatives. And he firsthand he was able to witness the collapse of rural social structures. And these experiences had fostered his preoccupation with abandonment, with decay, and the spectral residue of violence, which we see very clearly portrayed in his works. Now, for some more context, we'll talk of Mexico's agrarian reforms and caquismo. So, under President Lázaro Cárdenas, Mexico implemented ambitious agrarian reforms. Same thing happened in India, right after independence and the Land Requisitioning Act. Now, in the Mexican scenario, the government redistributed millions of hectares from large haciendas or estates. We are drawing parallels to the zamindari system, right? To communal ejidos, these communal groupations, right? And though they were transformative in principle, the process, like any socialist, highfalutin socialist communist policy, was very uneven, and there existed a lot of lacunas and room for corruption. So here, what happened was the local caciques or the landed strongmen, they co-opted with the new regime, and they co-opted with these reforms to maintain control. And with this, they perpetuated the economic inequality that had existed even before the revolution and the war by changing their allegiances and getting new political patronage, right? And Rulfo's Komala is like a microcosm of these tensions. So the once fertile and lush verdant land now is fallow. The churches and homes that stood very proudly, they are crumbling. So in Rulfo's words, he said, Comala fue un lugar de promesas incumplidas. To translate to English, Comala was a place of unfulfilled promises. So the town's desolation here mirrors rural Mexico's unfulfilled revolutionary dreams. Right now, we are moving on to literary milieu and Rulfo's innovations. So Pedro Páramo emerged in 1955, and this was before the onset of the Latin American boom. So Latin American boom is basically that in Spanish literature, it before this boom, mostly the important literature, the poetry, the prose came from the old continent, that is Europe and Spain. But during this boom, many notable and important literary works came out that were Latin American, that were in Mexico, in South America, and this is what uh, coincided with the Latin American boom. So here, what is notable is that the fragmented narrative, the polyphonic voices, and minimalist prose, it shattered the conventional storytelling that was before, that was taken from or the old continent ethos, the Aristotelian ethos of how a play or a prose or a written work should be presented. Right. So here, Rulfo was influenced by European modernists like William Faulkner and Virginia Woolf, but he also was heavily influenced by Mexican oral traditions. And what resulted was a style that seamlessly blended the real and the uncanny, right? So his economy of language, using sparse, elliptical, evocative phrases, it sort of set the stone. It set the stage, pardon, for the later masters of magical realism, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez, who in his interviews he acknowledged Rulfo's influence on 100 Years of Solitude, no? Cien Años de Soledad, that won him the Nobel Prize. He's citing that Pedro Paramo's layering of time and spectral presence was a foundational text for the Latin American literary boom. In part two, we speak about narrative architecture, fragmentation, polyphony, and minimalism. So here we have non-linear time and memory loops. Um, in this, so here Pedro Paramo, in the book as well as in the movie, it unfolds in this non-chronological mosaic, right? So the novel opens with Juan Preciado's arrival in Comala, but soon these temporal boundaries they start dissolving. Childhood memories, present dialogues, and postmortem reflections sort of intermingle into one single element, if I have to say it like this. And this narrative dislocation mirrors memory's workings because memory is associative, memory is recursive. And in face of trauma, it can also be incomplete. There can be certain amnesia into our memory. We now talk about the chorus of ghosts, that is polyphony in prose. So it is notable that over 50 narrators, living and dead, both living and dead, contribute to the monologues that build Komala's collective memory. So the key voices here being Juan Preciado and his transformation from living seeker to spectral interlocutor. Next, we have Dorotea, the guide whose fragmented recollections map Komala's forgotten corners, right? We have Susana San Juan, Pedro Paramo's obsessive love, whose delirium bridges the past and the present. We have also Abundio Martinez and his half told legend of hidden gold underscores the futility of greed. Right now he's deaf and mute. He cannot I think he's only mute, but he cannot speak. He walks around like a vagabond, all this due to his greed, and he being the son of Pedro Paramo, right? Then we have finally we have Fulgor Sedano, the bureaucrat and the handyman whose recorded testimonies reveal the institutional decay that has seeped into every ambit of Komala society. So here the Rulfo's use of elliptical sentences as in not using complete sentences, shorthand sentences, stark dialogue, absent narrators, it it creates this effect that engages readers as sort of witnesses and co-creators, and the narrative voids are filled with the reader's own interpretation. Right now we have, if you have to speak of minimalism as atmosphere, so Rulfo's minimalist style, that is short declarative sentences and sparse description, create an atmosphere of desolation. A single sentence, as they say, can evoke vast landscapes. For example, el sol abrazaba el aire y el polvo parecía más polvo que en cualquier otra parte. Translated into English, it says the sun burnt alive the air, and the dust seemed more dusty than in any other part of the region. So maybe for Juan Rulfo, it meant Komala, but for the reader, I am reading this in Baroda. I feel this is Baroda, this description is Baroda or Ahmedabad or some other part of arid part of Gujarat. So this sort of creates that the reader feels like he is on his own creating a new experience, a new literary sensational experience through these economy of language. And this economy intensifies the uncanny, the less explained, the more haunting, the more astral, right? Now we are moving towards part three, that is the thematic deep dive. We are taking a thematic deep dive into memory, death, power, and landscape. So I will talk of memory's burden and freedom. So in Kamala, memory is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it sustains identity. For example, Susana's recollections of childhood and Preciado's vow to his mother. Yet at the same time, it also burdens characters with unending grief. For example, Dorothea's lament, in which she says, I quote, Me cuesta trabajo recordar hasta el día de mi muerte, uh, which means it is very difficult for me to remember till the day of my death. And it shows this shows the memory's paradox, that to remember is to suffer, but to forget is to cease to exist. So what does one do? Are we condemned to the beauty and the ugliness of memory that it brings, these memories bring in our life? We now talk about death's continuum. So here Juan Rulfo portrays death as a state of being, right? It is not a finality, but as a sort of a continuing state. So here ghosts are interacting with the living, reenacting rituals, and even articulating desires. So for example, Preciado's realization that descubrí mi voz, descubrí que mi voz era un eco en un valle sin fin. I discovered that my voice was an echo in a valley, in a never ending valley, in an endless valley. So, this realization transforms death into an echoing realm where the past and the present come together in a state of limbo, you can say, they coalesce together to form a coalesced narrative, right? And if we are to talk about the power, the land, and oppression, here, Pedro Páramo is the cacique, the zamindar, and he symbolizes the betrayal of revolutionary ideals. For example, his control over the land, the church, and even civil authority persists. It endures beyond his death, right? As Komala sort of, after his death, Komala becomes a sort of a spectral fief, right? And this novel critiques agrarian reforms failures and the endurance of authoritarian structures through regime changes. If we talk about the landscape as character and symbol, um, Komala's geography, the arid plains, the collapsed churches, dust-laden streets, they act as a silent witness. And here Rulfo writes, El polvo era la memoria del olvido. So the dust was the memory of oblivion. So here in this statement, he's saying that the land remembers violence, the land remembers neglect, the land remembers unfulfilled promises, and these things are what shape the inhabitants' fates. So it is a land that endures. It is the land that experiences, our Mother Earth that experiences, but the land has a memory of its own, right? And which it never forgets. We move to here now we move to part four, that is Rodrigo Prieto's cinematic language. We start with his visual ethos, light, color, and composition. So Rodrigo Prieto's signature lies in naturalistic lighting. This is his hallmark. Painterly framing. Naturalistic lighting is where light is presented as a form, it is not artificial, but natural light elements are used. Painterly framing as is basically means that uh, a photo. The photographer uses techniques to change the photo into a sort of a painting, right? That is painterly framing and textural detail, adding a lot of details in, adding a lot of textural detail in the frames. So in Páramo, the director uses golden hour exteriors to capture Kolomala's dusty beauty. Golden hour, I think it is the sunrise, the time of sunrise, and also the time of sunset. He also employs chiaroscuro interiors. Uh, Chiaroscuro is the Italian word for light and dark, the interplay of light and dark. So here, with narrow beams of sunlight, in the houses, right, the narrow beams of sunlight pierce through the roofs, the holes in the roofs, and they pierce through the darkness. So this again shows this sort of fusion of the natural and the supernatural, right? And he also chooses a desaturated palette for present day scenes. Desaturated as in someone that is some a photo that is not very saturated with colors. It feels dry, it feels devoid of colors a little bit, right? So that is punctuated by red accents. So here, red symbolizes both memory and violence. For example, Susanna's dress is red and it is very vividly portrayed, and the bloodstains as well, they are very vividly portrayed. So here, I think the point was that one does not forget if one loves someone, if he loves someone, or that person has a very important place in his life. So it is very difficult to erase the memory, and it is very vivid even after years have passed. And also violence, both uh, violence that one experiences and one commits. It is very vivid in one's mind through many years. Right now, we are going to tackle the architectural elements, the frames shot with arches, doorways, foliage, and these create a sense of depth and evoke entrapment, right? So entrapment as in for the viewer and the reader. The more because what I feel is when I'm reading, there is, as Wittgenstein said, there is, as you are reading, there is sort of mental image in your mind. So the literary sort of becomes a meta version of a film. So here, the more I read about three-dimensional things, the more I read about conversational narratives, the more I feel that I'm part of it. It is not some extra um, external element, but as if I'm part of the process and the story, right? So we have also um, we also analyze we also analyze camera movement and editing rhythms. So here, Prieto's camera is both the ghost and at the same time the witness. So his techniques include, for example, fluid tracking. That is, um, the camera follows Preciado at eye level. So this shows that the person who is watching this, he is with him. He is inside the screen, and this sort of creates a sense of empathy and as well as disorientation. Then we have static long takes, that is holding frames during key revelations. So, for example, um, Preciado, when he sees Pedro Paramo's portrait or Susana's mental breakdown. So, this holding frames during revelation helps us to focus on the details, and they, on its own, create memories of the interactions between these two, not protagonists, but very important roles the figures are playing. Then we have temporal overlays, that is audio overlaps and cross cutting between flashbacks and present, that help maintain narrative fragmentation. They are in synchronization with the visual aspects, the visual overlay of the film, right? Um, just a moment. Then we move to rendering the supernatural uh, to evoke magical realism without overtly using CGI effects. Prieto is employing double exposures and reflections. Double exposure is basically you are overlapping one photo over the another to create a sort of a fused photo. So here in this film, Susanna is appearing as a translucent figure, while the ghosts are, uh, are flickering whenever they look in the mirror. Then we have controlled underexposure. Controlled underexposure would be to again dampen the contrast, the light, the natural light, to show a sort of a gloomy, a sort of a very nostalgic effect, to give a very gloomy, nostalgic effect to the photos. So here the shadows seem to be swallowing the edges, and at the same time they suggest us this sort of unseen phantom presences. It feels like due to this controlled exposure, as if we are in a horror or sort of a dark movie, which it kind of is. It very much is. But these cinematic techniques help to highlight the proposition, of the text. Then we have, if we speak of sound design, the whispered echoes are recorded binaurally, with the ambient creaks and bells that are linking the scenes across time to give this effect of the supernatural, to give this effect of something very mysterious and out of human control, something forlorn. And finally, if we talk about the score, that was composed by Alfonso Duran. Here, just like Rulfo, the cinematographers have used indigenous instruments for the ocarina, marimba, and the minimalist strings to provide the sort of leitmotifs for the characters and mood. So leitmotifs is basically like when suppose a villain is coming, a protagonist is coming, there is a certain sort of tune, sound that sort of goes with the that symbolizes something good or something bad, something mysterious, the protagonist, the villain, the hero. So this sort of auditory accompaniment is what is a leitmotif for the characters and moods. Finally, we are arriving at uh, this. We will dive into the scene by scene shot analysis and critical perspective. So we start with the courtyard sequence, where Susanna is sort of wandering around. In this pivotal scene, Juan Preciado sees Susana San Juan. She's wandering around a moonlit courtyard, and here the establishing shot, that is a wide shot of the courtyard at dusk. Here the golden light is giving way to deep blue shadows. Okay. Deep blue. Okay, deep blue
Please
shadow.
mute yourselves, please.
Okay.
Yeah, carry on, Aman.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So here the architectural ruins in the frame, uh, they frame the space, and they are sort of showing the background of decay, of something in decadence, of something in decline. So here, when the camera glides forward as Preciado is approaching Susana, and while her white dress is, being illuminated by a single lantern, this movement suggests sort of an otherworldly approach, which is captured in the tracking shot. So here again, we see these elements of phantom presences of the supernatural, otherworldly, this other out of the world um, feeling that one gets by reading the book and watching the movie. So this tracking shot is sort of, this is the function, this is the role this tracking shot is playing. So when the medium close up to Susanna's face, when the camera does a close up shot, a medium close up shot towards Susanna's face, Her eyes are hollow with longing. So Prieto is using this shallow focus where he shows the background is dissolving into darkness. And then we have the over the shoulder shot that from Preciado's perspective, the camera looking over the shoulder of Juan Preciado, Susana is lifting her hand and a tear catches the lantern light. So this frame's symmetry is evoking classical portraiture. So both indigenous and contemporary, the European, the contemporary elements are being used to create this melange, right? This mestizaje, which we call the Spanish, the mulattoes and the Mexicans, they refer to as this intermingling of European and indigenous knowledge structure, knowledge systems and structures. Then we go to the reverse angle shot, which here it captures the reverse angle shot here captures Juan Preciado's reaction. It shows him uncertain and somewhat entranced. So here this shot, while it is freezing the frame, it is letting the silence and the ambient sounds dominate the visual imagery, the visual aspects of the frame, right? And then we have the insert that is, for example, there is a close up of a cracked fountain. Water is trickling, and this basically is a motif. Many critics have described it as a motif of a life that has been interrupted. Then if we are moving to the audio bridge shot, then we are seeing Susanna's whispered voice that overlaps the cut, right, to a flashback of her as a child in which where she's chasing butterflies in sunlight. So this sort of idyllic memory sharply contrasts with the fact that all this time her father was actually sexually abusing her, and Susanna was used to hate herself, not because her father used to sexually abuse her, but because she confessed that she liked and she fantasized about her own father sexually abusing her. So this sort of how can I explain it? This dark and light, it is contrasting together throughout different scenes. That is basically showing the paradoxes of human life, the human existence, the beautiful on one side, the ugly on another side. But this is part of life. So this is what the audio bridge shot is trying to achieve. Then we this sequence these sequences embody magical realism. Practical lighting is used, nothing too fancy, nothing too artificial. VFX is kept to a minimal, and editing is very precise to evoke basically the ghost elements, the uncanny elements. It is so precise that it feels sort of creepy. It feels weird, right? But that is the proposition of the cinematography of of the film, to evoke, to sort of, as they say that the directors are the translators of the writers are the original writers. The writers are the original. They create the literary work, but the directors translate from the literary uh, to the visual, to the theatrical. So yeah, so this is very much notable. Finally, we are going to talk about the uh, penultimate thing. Pardon. We are going to talk about the critical perspectives, right? The post-colonial and the psychoanalytic readings. Here we begin with the post-colonial lens. Scholars argue that Komala represents colonial legacies of land disposition. So Paramo's control parallels colonial encomienda systems, and his spectral rule suggests the persistence of colonial power beyond death. So we see a lot of parallelisms in India. No, we say Angrez chale gaye, apni aulad chhod gaye. So like these type of post-colonial situations where the landed gentry of India, they became the new colonizers, especially after in the years after independence. They had sort of good relations with the politicians, and so they used this to create an India which was on theory. In theory, it was a democracy, but in reality, it was a feudalistic society behind this sort of hogwash of a liberal democracy. So here again, if we are going into the psychoanalytical approach, the fragmentation of identity in Pedro Páramo aligns with Lacanian notions of the mirror stage and the uncanny. So basically, for example, the well echo and the mirrored reflections symbolize the divided self and repressed trauma. So here, basically, what it is saying is that if the story was idyllic, the narrative would have been very structured. But since this story has so much trauma, and trauma evokes a certain amnesia, a certain sort of blurring the lines when it happened, the blurring of temporalities. So the same thing the writer has evoked in Pedro Paramo, the novel, and the directors have also tried to achieve the same thing through this fragmentation of to display the fragmentation of identity through the fragmentation of the narrative, through portraying disjointed narratives, right? Then finally we have the feminist critique. So Susanna's objectification and madness critique patriarchal commodification of women. So her madness, some critics interpret her madness as a form of resistance, that is refusal to submit to Paramo's desires. So we also see in feminist critiques how the men of the society have completely robbed the women of their own agency, right? Pedro Paramo is going around raping women, sexually assaulting women, and their voices are never heard. Like, what do they feel about it? When Pedro Paramo had a lot of debts, and he tried to, get over to settle his debts by marrying the daughter, or by marrying the woman who owned. Who had a lot of debts, right? So she, instead of being angry or saying, "How dare you make this proposition?" She says that it is a great honor to me for to get to marry you. So the women have been robbed so much of their agency that they don't even know, that of the patriarchal structures that oppress them, right? And shortly after marriage, he abandons her, sort of takes all his properties, because the marriage is a communal unification of assets. Then again, if we are seeing that Pedro Paramo's son is also sexually assaulting, raping women and everything, but these women complain, but they never say their names. They never speak about it. They just are sort of portraits in the scene. They sort of just have these hard stone faces. And what does Paramo says? Who is this woman? What is her name? And when I think his secretary or his assistant, his handyman, says that she didn't tell me her name. So he said, "Oh, she didn't tell you her name. So this means she does not exist. We'll just ignore her, let it pass." So these sort of feminist, these sort of patriarchal structures that oppress, the agency of women. So this is shown through the novel, but it is highlighted even more through in the cinema, in the cinematic interpretation, right? Because the head worker says she worked with Pedro Paramo for 20 years, but she could only become the head of all the servants because she learned self-respect. And she said that she was the only servant who did not allow Pedro Paramo to sleep with her, right? So uh, these sort of narratives again show the sort of state of a woman, because I was we read about Gayatri Spivak. I'm not getting her name clearly. This was this can the subaltern speak? So here the subaltern is the woman, and since she cannot speak, or at least she's shown as some sort of a inanimate entity, does she deserve to be heard? This is sort of the implicit question of the author. Ma'am, how many minutes do I have left, or is the time over?
No, no, no. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Carry on.
Yeah, so we are moving now to the adaptation ethics and the audience reception. So the film has won plaudits as well as criticism and analysis. So there have been objections from certain critics that they claim that the narrative coherence, because once when you read the novel, when you finish reading the novel, you for the first time you will be very much confused, like what did I just read? Who is alive? Who is dead? Who did what to whom? Because everything is so disjointed. It feels like a jigsaw puzzle. But when you watch the same work in the Netflix adaptation, it feels there is still disjointed elements, but it doesn't make you feel like your head. It doesn't make your head spin. You can follow the narrative somewhat, and this is what has led to certain criticism from the purists, that they say that this film should have completely mirrored Pedro Paramo's Juan Rulfo's narration technique. Then at the same time, it has received praise for they are lauding they have lauded the sensory immersion and accessibility to new audiences, right? So the purists claim that it is a deviation from the canonical, but at the same time there are many who have said that there is sensory immersion that has been faithfully translated from the literary to the cinematographical. And then again there is this accessibility for new audiences who have not read the novel, who are not aficionados of Spanish literature. So when they watch the movie, it is not that they are completely at a loss for understanding. Now, also, this movie has been analyzed in the Hispanic Review and Film Quarterly, and here it has been examined how Prieto's images complement or transform Rulfo's themes, like how Prieto has interpreted and translated Juan Rulfo's work from the literary medium to the cinematic medium. So yeah, I think this film has also won some awards for cinematography and sound design, which I feel is well deserved. And yeah, some have hailed it as a landmark adaptation of the literary masterpiece by Rulfo. And so now, over this, I don't know, 25, 30 minutes, we have navigated Komala's haunted landscapes through Rulfo's prose and Rodrigo Prieto's cinematography. We have traced Rulfo's personal and historical influences, dissected his narrative architecture, and delved into themes of memory, death, and power. Now, Prieto's visual strategies that are naturalistic lighting, fluid camera movement, and subtle supernatural effects help to bring Rulfo's ghosts into this sort of palpable presence that you can feel, you can touch, so you can feel it around you just by looking into the screen of your laptop, mobile, or on the cinema theater. So as we reflect on this extended journey, we should try to consider how literature and film collaborate, to shape collective memory and identity. So here, Pedro Páramo endures because it speaks to universal human concerns, that is, loss, longing, and the specter of history. Um, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aman. I think it has been a really detailed analysis of not just the film, but also its literary antecedent, the novel. And I'm glad you began it with the novel because my entry into the film was also through looking at it as a magic realist narrative. So in a sense, like I also began to make sense of the film through a literary technique. Uh, and um, uh, and also I thought that the way you spoke very eloquently about camera angles and all that. So I was reminded when you were discussing cinematography, how our very first introduction to Komala is through this top angle shot, where Presiendo is looking at the town. And if you look at it metaphorically, then it is almost like you are kind of, descending into some kind of a purgatorial space where you are going to, henceforth encounter spectral characters. So thank you for that introduction. It is now open for discussion. Anyone would like to come in?
Um,
Yes, yes, Nikhila.
Yeah, just to get the conversation going. Aman, thank you very much for the overview of the film, its contextualization, also its relation to its antecedent text. I learned a lot about the film. But you ended your discussion saying that the film is more intelligible than the novel. In fact, after watching the film, I was completely puzzled. So I went back to the novel to be able to make sense of the film. Maybe it is a kind of dual, you kind of piece things together through two texts and also repeated viewing and reading. Maybe that's what helps a little bit. So when I went back to read the novel, some things made more sense to me than the film. But one aspect, which I mean, I quite didn't get it, while I was watching the film, which is somewhat, clearer with respect to the novel. The son who is this trope of the son who is coming in search of the father, becoming in some ways a witness, as well as a relayer of history. So someone who relays history. So and he is a kind of narrative focal point, in the sense that all these women whom he meets are telling him stories of what was. So it's a kind of he's the a kind of point, which is so he's a collector and relayer of these narratives, or the medium through whom, or at least to begin with, that's what at least in the novel, gives a sense of some way of holding on to what is happening. So because he's there to kind of hold the narrative together, and we see what might have been through him. Whereas in the film, when it slips back into the past, so who is focalizing that past was completely mysterious. Is it him? Through whose point of view is it being narrated? Is it his past? Are we going back to him, or to Don Pedro's? I was completely puzzled, but reading the novel helped, to some extent. But that artifice of the son being the narrative, the gatherer of narratives, so to speak, is dispensed with pretty early on. And then it's all over, So we don't know who is narrating whose story. In fact, while reading the novel as well, the narratives just proceed with quotation marks. We don't know. I mean, the cues that we are used to looking for, so the beginning of a quotation mark must be attributed to a subject. So that subject often is absent. Of course, I read it in English translation, so I'm not sure if it's a problem with that. So there are whole pages and sections which we don't know, whose words, about whom are these. So I liked it very much precisely because of this decentering of the narrative. There is no, and decentering and fragmentation of the narrative. There is no one agency which is, kind of telling the story. We can pretty much make sense of it in the way we want. And another thing that I, thought after reading the novel is, in the film, we don't quite know, or it could also be that, it's just been one viewing, whereas probably you've viewed the film, watched it several times. But with one viewing, one doesn't get a sense of Don Pedro's, duplicity, cunning, cruelty. Whereas so much of Don Pedro is constructed by many people, many other people for us in the novel, whether it's, and more extensively, whether it's the father. There is a lawyer later on who also talks about how he kept getting his other son, the one who dies, out of trouble, and so on. So there is a whole saga of wickedness of this man. So there is no empathy for him. Whereas here, you kind of begin to feel for him when he grows older. I don't know. I felt that the film is encouraging us not to completely see him as this cruel landlord. That in fact, none of that cruelty is actually there for us on screen. Of course, it's not there even in the novel, but it is reported extensively by other characters. Here we kind of see him, particularly with respect to his son. We see him as a foolish father, indulgent towards his son and all those. I mean, they don't seem so major. And his relation with Susanna. So some of these I thought were, elements. Maybe it requires a second viewing to make sense of the film better. But thanks very much. Between the novel and the film, I think I kind of made some sense of the narrative of Don Pedro. Thank you very much for suggesting this film and for laying out the ground so wonderfully well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. I just would like to elaborate on a piece of information that here, when we are talking about Pedro Páramo, his father and his sons, we are seeing here that as Geeta ma'am said, that Juan Preciado arrives at Komala. He's like a sort of a testament to what is occurring, to the events that are occurring. So I would say that it is much less of being a testament to the things that are occurring, more of a sort of an ancestral burden. Because here in Mexican societies, as in Indian indigenous societies, the element there is this big element of karma. So it is said in Mexican society that the sins of the father have to be borne by the son, and the sins of the son have to be borne by the father. So here we are seeing that Pedro Páramo, this Juan Preciado, who is a son of Pedro Páramo, he literally dies of fright due to so many, the torment of the ghosts that his father had murdered. Here again, we are seeing when Pedro Páramo has three sons: Juan Preciado, who comes in search of him; Abundio, who he disowned, he did not accept; and the second one was Miguel Páramo, who at first he did not accept, but then he accepted. He just spoiled him rotten, and it was his indulgence toward him when he committed so many atrocities, and so much people warned him that he is going to bring the end of you, but he just uh, he turned a blind eye to his misdeeds. It felt in the movie as if he was, through his facial expression, as if he was secretly approving and condoning his actions, even though in public he had to play the father figure and just express displeasure. So this came back to haunt him when Miguel died suddenly, during one of his he was going to meet his lover, or I don't know, some again, he was going to commit some perversion, and he died on the way when his horse fell. The same thing happened with his son Abundio. He neglected him, he did not acknowledge him, he had to live like a beggar, and he lost his lover due to Pedro Paramo's cruelty. So this his son came back to his father, and he murdered his father. And Juan Preciado, his other son, he died literally by the ghosts, by the torment of the ghost that his father in turn tormented when they were living. So this thing, it's sort of a cyclical, karmic chain that is curious, that only it is going through a patriarchal pattern. The grandfather, the father, the son. It is going like that. When Pedro Paramo's father died, it was Pedro Paramo, who murdered all the guests. I think his father died in a misfire. It was by accident during a wedding. But Pedro Paramo said, "No, no, no, I will murder all the guests." And this started a chain reaction that ended into the destruction of Komala, into the destruction of the Paramo family. So this is worth noting, that more than a witness, they are sort of karmic prisoners, in a crime that was committed by the paternal ancestors. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nikhila, and thank you, Aman, very much.
Geeta, if I can just
Yeah,
comment just
sure,
for
sure, sure, please.
yeah, I was also wondering, Aman, what you think of the Father Rentiara, I think that's
Renteria, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, in the novel, I think it's also there in the film. So much of um, when you were talking about the women, so much of the judgmental aspects about these women and the bad faith that they're forced to experience comes from the perspective of the father and his condemnation. So since your presentation didn't refer much to this aspect, I just thought I'll ask you what you think about it. But that's it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. Actually, I wanted to speak about more on it, but the time limit was there. I think we are already 10 o'clock, so I will try to make it short. So here again, the filmmakers and the author both show the patriarchal system of the church, because the church is, what is a church but an organized system of power? No. So here, because what is most compelling is that Miguel Paramo killed Father Renteria's own brother. And when he went to apologize to the daughter of his brother, that is his niece, instead of apologizing, he then raped her. And even after so much, even after committing so much atrocities to Father Renteria's own kith and kin, when Miguel died, uh, you know, Pedro Paramo used a mix of money and intimidation to make Father Renteria give him absolution, because Father Renteria didn't want to give him, but through money power, through muscle power, he made him give absolution. So this shows the perversion of uh, spirituality, of religion, through patriarchal power structures. At the same time, it shows, and then again, what we see, if I may mention one sentence for a minute, uh, When the sister of the prostitute, she comes to Father Renteria and saying that her sister has died, and he asked her what did she do. So what did she do in life? And she said she used to sell her body. She had no money to eat, nothing. So he said that no, then I cannot give absolution because this woman is a sinner. But we see how this woman is a sinner. But when Miguel raped and murdered his own brother and niece, he didn't say a word. He just cried in private, but he didn't say a word. And then what happened we see is that the woman the father Renteria said to the sister of this of the woman who was engaged in the flesh trade. He said, do you have money? Because if you have money, we can arrange for some funeral with some other church, because the church needs to survive. And she said that, I don't have any money. So she said, get out, just go out of here, because I cannot help you anymore. So here again we see the solidarity of women, because when there was nobody to give her sister of her dead sister a funeral, all the women of Komala, a lot of women from the Komala village, they came together, they arranged a wake for her. They chanted hymns, they did whatever they could. They chanted the Holy Scripture for hours, just so she could get absolution. So we here also see this sort of a silent solidarity of women in the face of patriarchal power structures. Yeah.
Thank you, Aman. Any other comments, questions? I think the names of the characters are also very, judiciously selected, because Pedro comes from Peter, which means stone, and Pedro Páramo is, hard-hearted like a stone. And Renteria also, like somebody who can be easily bought over by with money. So the naming of the characters also has been done very judiciously, thought.
Yeah, no, actually, Pedro, it comes from the Greek word for stone.
Hmm.
And here we are seeing, like in the book, in the novel, it describes how when Pedro sees the state that Komala has come in, Pedro has caused the destruction of the once prosperous Komala. Now it is like a rocky sort of barren land. The writer says, that Pedro collapses like a bag of stones.
Bag of stones.
Yeah, and if you are looking at Páramo, so in Páramo in Spanish means a barren wasteland. So this is what this creature has created. It He has made once lush, fertile ground into a páramo, no, like a barren wasteland through his stone heart. So these sort of metaphors are there definitely in the work here.
Any other comments, questions? Any of your responses to the film? Sanjay, would you like to say something?
Yeah, nothing much. Well, I enjoyed watching the film, and also, of course, I've read the novel, and some of the devices used by Juan Rulfo as well as the director of the film, like the dead people speaking. I was thinking of this short story of Dostoevsky, that Bobok. In Bobok also, there is a dead person, there is a dead character already speaking from the grave, and the whole conversation takes place. So here also, the narrator, like Juan, who is the son of Pedro, and one lady who are conversing from the grave. And so many parts of the stories are narrated by them. So as the narrator, I mean, the first narrator himself dies in the story, which is very interesting, because then we have the chance of entering other narrators, and many of them are women. So it's like collating all these scattered narratives to construct one story. And I mean, in one sense, it seems like coming, going back to the past and coming to the present, but sometimes also indicating the future. So all these techniques are used here in this film. But the story somehow evolves, and then it ends with the death of Pedro Paramo. So in a way, even if back and forth kind of narrative is there, but it ends with the death of Pedro Paramo, and the character one of the sons of Pedro Paramo, um, who is going with his donkeys, and one meets him in the way, and he shows him the village that you can go there. Abundio, yeah, is one of the sons of Pedro. So he is there in the beginning of the film, and he is also at the end of the film. So again, it's like it's kind of cycle, as you were saying, that we come back to that. The first character is also one of the he comes back in the end of the film to kill the father.
Mm-hmm. No,
Yeah. So
no,
yes.
definitely. Like here, what we are experiencing is how the sociology of a culture is represented in the literary works of a culture. So in Western individualistic societies, in America, in Europe, the figure of the supernatural, of the ghost entities, they are looked with a lot of suspicion, as if they are something dangerous, they are something violent, they are something to be afraid of. So that is the perspective of Western individualized societies, where individualistic psychological frame is there of its citizen. But in countries like, let's say, India, in countries like Mexico, where there is Dia de los Muertos, where they hold vigils in cemeteries, and have give food. They have a very sort of they feel like death is not something to be feared, but it is like you pass to another portal. So the ghosts of the ancestors, all that, it is nothing to be feared, but these ghosts are sort of benign creatures that have a benign presence in our lives. So in countries like India, in Latin America, Mexico, where there is a sort of a communal mindset, a communal sociology, thinking about the group rather than individualistic terms. So here the ghosts in literary spaces are portrayed as sort of figures, existences, as shadows that are always with you, sort of a benign presence. Because here we see not a single ghost sort of attacked or threatened or did anything. They were sort of like normal regular people, nothing to be afraid of. But most of the Western literature, they portrays ghosts or some other supernatural creatures as a sort of imposition, as a sort of threat on the individual space, on the individual no life of a person, and therefore they are portrayed as ghosts. But in communal spaces, in where this sociology growing up, this has been that community over the self. So these ghosts, they are sort of cohabitants of these spaces. So this is a point to be noted. I think even in Russia, the communal spaces, it is sort of, so therefore it is not something very ghost, that a ghost is very something to be feared, something very dangerous, but you have a nice little chat with a ghost. So this is the literary translation, the literary reflection of sociological belief systems. Yeah.
Thank you, Aman. That was interesting. It reminded me of Isabel Allande's House of Spirits, where also, the ghosts just become part of our lives, and it's difficult to say who is a ghost and who is the actual living person. And that also happens while watching this film. You begin to wonder, is she a ghost? Is she not a ghost? So there is that blurring of distinction. Any other responses? Tarkeshwar, would you like to speak? David.
Thank you. I'm
Yeah.
listening, but I don't think I have anything original to say at this point.
Okay. Yagnashri, would you like to say something?
Actually, any comments about the sense of place? I mean, from the information that we had at the start of it, I just knew it was made in Spanish. I didn't know where it was, but almost from the first few frames, I just felt sure this is Latin America. And actually, I thought it was Peru or Colombia, but
Yeah, pardon. Actually,
can you analyze how did it work? How
yeah,
did we
yeah,
know
yes.
that it was
So,
Latin America?
pardon, I didn't specify. It was from Mexico, right? This is from Mexico, and the background is the Revolutionary Wars. The Revolutionary Wars of Mexico, the civil wars, the landlord. You know what happens after a civil war or a revolutionary war? It is general disarray. So these
So,
landlords, local landlords, become very powerful, and yeah, so it is
so,
like a very feudalistic Mexico. Yeah.
so a little bit more than 100 years ago, and by the end we knew that, and there was mention of the name Pancho Villa, but the first 30 minutes or something, there was nothing obvious to tell you where it was, but there was this whole sense this has to be Latin America, and I'm not quite sure how that works,
Mhm. No, so
but
here we are also seeing, no, that the the sort of the crashing between the indigenous and the colonial.
yes,
So the colonial power structures, the patriarchal power structures have sort of suppressed, in a way, the indigenous, the more equitative powers, the societal structures. So this is sort of reflected in the scenes that, the patriarch, because the colonizers were basically, these are a sort of figure of Pedro Páramo, no? Heartless, cruel, singular focus. And when the colonizers have finally left, they have transferred these post-colonial sensibilities, feudalistic sensibilities to the local elite, and which have suppressed the indigenous, the marginalized, in this case, the woman. So this is evoking a lot. If you have seen the movie as well, the architecture, the clothing style, and even if you have seen the English dubbing, the accent is in Mexican. It is like a
yes.
Mexican English. So that should very much help to orient you. Yeah.
So that's how it works. Yes.
Yeah. 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 Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. I think Nikhila has put a comment in the chat box in response to your contention that, most of the ghosts are benign creatures. She says, but Yuan dies being frightened out of his wits by ghosts in the ghost town. I don't know whether Aman would agree, but my response to that would be, we don't know where Yuan and his mother have gone. So probably it's because they are out of Komala, they have a different, a different perspective of ghosts. I don't know. Aman, you should be in a better position to comment on this.
So here again, we are saying that Juan dies. Yes, he dies out of the fright by the ghosts, but the ghosts don't are not particularly attacking him. It is just that he cannot handle. As you are saying. For example, I will quote a scene when he goes to this when he is picked up by this incestuous couple. The brother and the sister are having an incestuous relationship. In this incestuous relationship, the brother is living and the sister has died. The ghost is what is inhabiting. So when Juan goes into their house and he's literally, trembling with fear and fright of the ghost, what does the sister say? She says that Look how he's sleeping. He's sleeping like, as if he has murdered a lot of people, as if he has killed a lot of people. A lot of people have died due to him. So, due to that guilt, due to that fear, due to that, you can say the ancestral karma, he's sleeping like he's about to die. So here again we are speaking of the sins of the father that the son has to endure. So his father killed these people, and I don't think that these spirits have attacked him in some way. It is just that he's overwhelmed by their presence, by their mere presence, and he dies out of this fright. So finally, this whole full circle of Pedro Páramo killing these people has been completed by the spirits of these people uh, uh, having a part to play in the death of Juan Preciado. So this is what I would say. This is what the accepted literary consensus and yeah is regarding this.
Okay, thank you, Aman. Any other responses to the film, to the
If
discussion?
I may add also that
Yes.
after he dies, in his grave, like who is putting him in his grave, it is sort of the ghosts which sort of can touch, can feel. So they are putting him in this grave, and who is he resting with? He's resting with another ghost that is, I think, Dorothea, right? So they are sort of sharing this space of the grave together. So this also suggests this sort of communion between the spirit world and the human world that is not necessarily antagonistic, bellicose. Yeah.
Okay. No more responses? Okay, in which case we will conclude this session. Thank you very much, Aman. It has been, I mean, you did a wonderful job of introducing the film, and we learned a lot from your introduction. And thank you all for logging in, for joining us, and hope to see you next week, same time. Good night. Thank you all.
Now,
Good night, everyone.
thank you very
Good
much.
night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good
See
night.
you all
Thank-
next Saturday. Bye.
Bye.